hypermobility syndrome and AS. Some people have both. In this video, I'm really excited to introduce to you Maria Harding. Maria has both AS and hypermobility syndrome, and she's a yoga teacher. In this video, she's going to introduce to you how to modify and safely adapt a yoga practice for AS and hypermobility. So, stay tuned and take care. Cheers everyone. If you would like a free one-page PDF summary of this video, then click the link in the description below and we would be happy to send it to you.
So nice to be here, and I'm really happy to be able to share with you a few pointers for managing hypermobility and AS in yoga. So let's get straight into it. The very first body part that is affected by lots of people with hypermobility is their elbows. Some people only have hypermobility in their elbows and nowhere else. So there's two main poses where we have to be careful, and that's cat-cow and downward facing dog. And the tips will be the same for both. So I'll just demonstrate cat-cow and then you can remember that for downward facing dog as well. So if we're coming into cat-cow, we're getting into our tabletop position here. Now the tendency here for everyone is to lock out the elbows, especially beginners, and you won't even be aware you're doing it. Now of course, for me, you can see that my elbows are not straight, and this is not good. You do not want this, because it's going to put strain on the joints and the ligaments. So the cues that we need to tell people are, we want to have a slight bend in the elbows and we want to turn them to face each other. So it's a 45-degree angle bend from front facing to inward facing. It's going to feel a bit weird when we do this, but with practice it becomes second nature. So in this position we now have the elbows in a much more neutral position, and we've still got the base here to be able to do our stretches from here. Okay, so that will be exactly the same for downward facing dog. Alright, now coming on to the hips. Right, so the number one problem pose in my opinion is pigeon pose, and I wonder if that was what caused my hip injuries. There's no way of really knowing, but in any case my advice would be that we really don't want to overextend and collapse into this pose when we're hypermobile. I'm not going to demonstrate this because of my injuries, but it's a matter of focusing on using the muscles rather than using gravity to just allow the body to completely flop into it. I can show you a little bit what I mean by just doing a forward bend. So pretend my legs were in pigeon pose. So I had one leg coming out here and the other one was behind. And then, you know, we lean forward. Now, the tendency for us with hypermobile joints, because we're so bendy and floppy, it's so easy for us to completely just flop down like this. And even when our chest is completely touching the floor, we still don't necessarily even feel the stretch. So what we need to do is actually come back up and either be on our hands or on our elbows here, supporting our body that way and really trying to draw in the abs, so we're actually supporting ourselves, we're not just flopping down like a rag doll. So that would be the number one thing. And the number two thing in pigeon pose is this front foot. I'm not going to put my leg back, sorry, but you know, the foot would be like this, right? What our tendency to do is we want to feel the stretch, right? Because it's kind of like, are we doing it right? I'm flopping down, I'm still not feeling it. So you want to sort of pull the foot even further away to try and get into that hip joint even more. But this isn't a good idea. Really what you want to do is keep that foot far away from the knee, protecting that hip from overextending and possibly stretching ligaments and then damaging labrums like I've done. So the foot far away from the knee and supporting our bodies as we're doing the forward bend. Okay, now the other ones I've got written down for hips are all the warrior poses and the lunges. Now the tendency with these is that because we've got such flexible hip flexors, that we easily flop down into them without the support of our main muscles in our legs and our buttocks and our abs. So for example, if I was in a lunge, say I was doing a sun salutation routine, and I was coming into a lunge, it would be really easy for me to just completely drop down here, and that's not so good. What we want to do is we want to encourage people to keep a 90-degree angle here and really stay strong in these muscles here, drawing the abs, engaging the thighs, engaging the butt muscles, so we're not just flopping down. I think from my experience, people don't realise they're doing it. I certainly didn't when I first started, so it needs to be, again, it's hard when we're doing online videos, but in a class situation, you need to keep your eye out for people that are doing that without realising it if they are hypermobile. And then the other one for the hips, I've got written down here, is the seated forward bend. So this is a similar thing to pigeon pose. Say we're sitting here and then we're going to start to walk our hands in front of us as we would for a nice warm-up stretch at the back. Now, it's very, very easy for hypermobile people to completely flop down here. And it would be the same if you're doing it with your legs out wide. It's the same thing for people to completely flop. But what we want to say to people is to draw in the abs. This is consistent through everything really. Engage through the abs. And instead of flopping forward and hyperextending in the back, what we want to do is draw the abs in and round the back. So it's more of a stretch through the back here and less about stretching through the hips and hyperextending the back. Does that make sense? So it's more like this kind of thing, and maybe resting on the elbows but no further, and less about this kind of thing where the chest comes forward, but we don't want that. All right, now coming into the back. I've got a few poses written down here actually. So the first one I've got is cow face pose. Now this is the one where of course we're doing this kind of thing with our legs, and then we've got our arms like this. Now I'm not going to do the full pose because of my hips, but I'll demonstrate the arm bit because this is what I want to show. So pretend my legs are in the cross-legged position. So we're reaching our arms up. Now there's two things that can happen here. As we reach our arm back behind and then we clasp. Now this is totally easy for us because we've got all the full range. But then we've got to be careful that that top arm doesn't go back too far and start to come out of its socket, which can happen. So we tell people that we want the arm to be facing upwards towards the sky and touching the ear. And that's a good cue to stop people from not realising that they are overextending their shoulder socket. The other thing is to encourage people to draw their ribs down and in rather than up and out and extending the back too far. So ribs go down and in this position. And then we're all good. Okay, and wheel pose. Okay, wheel pose. I mean, I think really if we're teaching people with AS, we don't want to be, I just wouldn't advise wheel pose really. I think it's too risky. If you're teaching a normal class, like I know you do, Jamie, you teach yoga to everyone, right? So with wheel pose, if you've got hypermobile joints, then you can easily overextend your elbows and, you know, possibly even dislocate them if you're not careful, or at the very least just strain them. And also in the back as well. I know I've done this before. So it's all about building strength. Really got to build up to this, and the best way to do that is to, you know, do things like this, where we're coming up here and we're really engaging our butt muscles and our core, and we're strengthening here and getting really strong here first, you know, for a long time before even attempting to lift up, which I'm not even going to do. So yeah, but for AS I wouldn't go there. Plank pose and chaturanga. Now again, this is this affects the elbows and the back as well. So as we're coming into plank pose, the tendency is to drop down. If we don't have the support of the abs, then the tendency is to drop down. So we want to get people to really draw in their abs. If they don't have that strength, then drop the knees and then draw the abs in, and then the elbows again facing each other and a slight bend. Okay, so that's plank. Now coming on to knees. The ones I've got written down here are triangle pose and mountain pose, but really any standing pose will be problematic if you've got hypermobile knees. So the key cues for people with hypermobile knees are that we don't want to lock out the knees. In the same way we don't want to lock out the elbows, we don't want to lock out the knees. So say we're coming into triangle pose, we want to have a micro bend in those knees. Just a slight bend, especially the back one where it's straight. I'm doing triangle, I thought I was doing warrior there. Yeah, so we're coming into triangle, we straighten the leg, we don't lock out this front leg, we have a micro bend. And then as we come down, this is the other problem. This isn't just knees, but the other issue is that it's all too easy for us to kind of lean into the hip flexors too much. You know, come in a little bit too much here. So what we want to do is stay really strong. Again, we want to draw in the abs, really feel like we're engaging all our muscles of our legs, our butt muscles. So we're staying nice and strong and tall and lifted rather than collapsing down. And then once we come down into triangle, instead of just collapsing into it, like we've got the flexibility to really, you know, we could go down to the floor like this, but we don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to maintain that strength up here. So what I say to people is, only come as far as you can go if you can easily lift your hand off your leg and you'll stay in exactly the same position. If you lift your hand off your leg and you're, oh, like this, then you're going too far. You don't have the support here to hold your body. So that's triangle pose. And the last one I have got written down here is mountain pose. And that's really just the same thing. It's such a simple pose, people don't realise that you can actually just be doing yourself damage if you've got hypermobile joints, especially with the knees. So again with mountain pose, it's just making sure that you're engaging those leg muscles and you've got that micro bend in the knee. So it's not pushing back onto the joint. And that's it. There was one other thing I wanted to tell you. Now in that link that you sent me on Yoga Journal, they had made a suggestion for downward facing dog that I don't agree with, and I want to explain why. Now they suggested getting a strap or a band, putting it around the elbows so that your elbows are pushing against the band. Now this is a good idea, but when it comes to practice and putting this into practice into downward facing dog, it doesn't work, and I'll show you why. So we get into our position to come into downward dog, and then what happens is I'm pushing against the band, but my head wants to be where the band is, but it can't because the band's in the way. So I'm having to hold my head up like this, and that's straining my neck. So for that reason alone, I'm going to say that I wouldn't recommend using the band for downward facing dog. Potentially you could use it for cat-cow. I think that's it. That's all I've got written down. Of course there's plenty more, but that's the key pointers, I suppose, that you can use throughout any yoga practice. It's really just about using your muscles and staying strong rather than collapsing in to the postures. Us with hypermobile joints, what we really need, we don't really need to do the stretches. Our ligaments are already really stretchy, and although it feels nice and it looks good that we can go into these really good postures, it's actually not good, and what we really need to focus on is strength building. And I will do a routine that will help people as well. So I'll do a whole guided routine where it focuses on that. So yeah, thank you and talk to you soon.
Remember to subscribe to Yoga for AS, and if you would like to take your practice further, here are 3 things that you can do. 1. Join our online Facebook community with people all over the world practicing Yoga for AS. 2. Practice with us live and join a Yoga for AS online yoga class. 3. Deepen your practice further with a personalized one-to-one. And finally, we have had people ask us how they can thank us for these videos, and we would love a coffee from Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you and have a great day.